It was a summer that promised both adventure and hard work. A teenage boy eager to assist his father in building a school arrived in the humid, vibrant hills of Honduras. The air was thick with the scent of earth and rain, and the landscape stretched out in a green expanse, dotted with towering mountains and rugged villages. Despite the beauty, there was an undercurrent to this place of quiet, ancient energy lurking beneath the surface. On the first day, the boy met Philip, a local with a wide grin and the confidence of someone who knew every twist and turn of the mountains. The two bonded instantly, their laughter echoing through the dense trees as they worked side by side. Philip was more than a friend. He was the boy's guide to this mysterious land, his presence comforting and bright. But in the back of the boy's mind, he noticed a certain caution in Philip's eyes, a flicker of fear when they ventured too close to certain parts of the village. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows over the village, the boy and his father joined the locals in an old stone church. Inside, the flickering candlelight cast eerie shapes along the walls. The church was packed, the congregation filling every pew, their faces somber and wary. As the pastor began the service, a tense silence settled over the room. It felt as if everyone was holding their breath, waiting for something beyond the words of the sermon. Midway through the pastor's sermon, the heavy church door groaned open. A girl stood silhouetted in the doorway, her jet black hair cascading over her shoulders, her expression utterly blank. She stepped forward, and as her face caught the light, her eyes entirely black became visible. An unnatural chill crept through the church. People shifted uneasily in their seats, avoiding her gaze, yet unable to look away. It was as if a malevolent presence had entered, filling every corner of the room with a heavy, oppressive darkness. Without hesitating, the pastor raised his voice. Speaking in hurried, solemn tones, he warned the congregation of a dark spirit that haunted the village, a spirit that thrived on fear and could latch onto anyone unprotected. His eyes flickered toward the mission group, lingering on the boy and his father. "Do not underestimate this evil," he said, his voice trembling slightly. At his words, families began to rise, ushering their children out, but the boy and his father stayed, curiosity overriding caution. As though they were bound to this dark presence, the mission group members gathered at the front of the church, forming a solemn line. They held each other's hands tightly, forming a chain against whatever evil might linger. The boy could feel his father's grip, steady yet tense. Across the church, the girl's vacant, black eyes scanned each face, her gaze piercing through the crowd. An unnatural silence fell over the room. Even the candles seemed to dim as the pastor and interpreter prepared to begin. The pastor and interpreter raised their voices in prayer, words flowing in a language the boy couldn't understand. The girl's face twisted in anger, her head thrashing from side to side. A guttural growl escaped her lips, a sound not of this world. Her body convulsed, her arms twisting as though being pulled by invisible hands. Shadows gathered around her, forming strange, dark shapes that writhed and pulsed like living entities, feeding on her fury. Suddenly, the girl let out a blood-curdling scream, a high-pitched wail that echoed in the boy's mind long after it faded. Black liquid began to seep from her eyes, trailing down her cheeks and pooling at her feet, a sickly, viscous substance that reeked of decay. The congregation gasped in unison, horrified but unable to look away. The black liquid spread, darkening the floor beneath her, as if the darkness itself were manifesting in physical form. In a violent burst of movement, the girl lunged forward, her fingers wrapping around the neck of one of the mission group members. The man's eyes widened in terror as he felt an icy darkness enter him. The girl's twisted grin reflected in his terrified gaze. Black mist spilled from her mouth into his, seeping into his body as he fell to the floor in convulsions. The boy watched, paralyzed, as the man's face contorted, his body writhing in pain, the evil spreading within him like a dark plague. The remaining mission group members formed a tight circle around the girl and the man on the ground. Their voices grew louder, their prayers desperate, drowning out her chilling laughter. The black liquid on the floor began to fade, retreating like a tide. Slowly, the dark mist dissolved, leaving the church in silence, as though the evil had finally been banished. Yet, the atmosphere remained tense, the relief mixed with lingering dread. When morning light finally broke, spilling through the stained glass windows, the boy felt his father's arms around him, pulling him close. The congregation sat in silence, each person processing the horrors of the night. The boy's heart was heavy, knowing he'd witnessed something beyond understanding. Though the darkness had lifted, the experience left scars that wouldn't easily fade. Years passed, but the memories of that night never left the boy. He later learned that Philip, his friend who had once laughed beside him, had died under mysterious circumstances soon after they left Honduras. Standing alone in the dim glow of candlelight, he held a small vigil, whispering a prayer for his friend. Guilt and sorrow weighed heavy on him, as he wondered if that darkness had claimed Philip as a final, tragic offering. As an adult, he looked back on that summer with a mixture of awe and horror. The hills of Honduras, once beautiful and inviting, now seemed a shroud for an ancient darkness that no one dared speak of. The evil they faced, he knew, was something far older, a force that lingered in the shadows, waiting, and though he had left it behind, he would always feel it there, lurking in the memories of his past.